everyone, welcome to an episode of the React Foundation series. So now that we have finished, well, I would say about 95% of our modal box, it's working, it's got the animation, we can do the content, we can set the content. So basically what we want to do now is want to move the modal box from being inside of a specific page to being inside of our layout. So this is going to be a bit of a refactoring episode. So let's jump right in and take a look at what we have. So this we're looking here at is we're looking at our layout. And what we really want to do here is we want to render the modal box in here. So what we also want to then do is then we want to move the modal box from being inside of the pages and especially the dashboard is to move it into the components folder, because it's something we can reuse over and over. And that's exactly why we have a structure like this, is that components that are shared across our app lives in the components folder. So what we need to do is doing a bit of refactoring. So right now we have the spinner components that is in somewhere. Is in the lib, I guess, lib components. So what we really want to do here, technically we can even move this modal into the lib directory, but for now we'll leave it here. This is fine. So what we want to do is we want to not render the component in here anymore, the modal box component. So we want to remove this over here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just do an import in the layout. So in here, I'm going to import from components modal. And then here, I'll render the modal ref. And basically, we need to set the modal. However, let's think about this for a second. If we set the modal for with the ref, the layout component, this.modal, will be just fine. But this is something to be shared across. So what we want to do is use some kind of a state. So what I'm going to show you guys how to do is I'm going to create another settings state over here. Here I'm going to do a new file called settings.js. And here I'm going to do import observable from mobx. And then const settings equals observable. And it's just a basic object like that. So it's an observable, and then we want to do an export. All right, so this right here represents the app-wide settings. So basically we can assign the modal to this settings when we in the layout. So once we have this so basically what we do is we'll pass the store with the provider. So what that means is when we need to have access to this, we just do inject settings, and then we basically use the settings.layout.modal. So yeah, we can do it like that. So we can go into pages, index. Yeah, so we can even call it, yeah, I think this is fine. Actually, what we want to do is, because, the settings, it could be for many things. So what we really want to do here is we could have, multiple settings. So in this case, it's the layout. So layout. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better. And what we can do is we can use an object like this. So in this case, what I mean is in this settings file, we could have multiple, we could have const, app, and other settings that we could change over time. In this case, it's going to be for the layout. So yeah, I think this will work just fine. So what we're going to do next is we're going to import, we're going to use this in our index over here. So I'm going to do an import settings from settings like that. And what we really want to do is we want to do settings like that. And so what we can do now is in our layout, we can access this. So just do a settings. And now we can use observable to basically modify the modal property in our settings over here. So let me show you guys exactly how that is done. So since we're rendering the modal, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do set modal callback node. So this is going to be called by the ref. So this.set modal, and then basically here, what we can do is then we can use the props. So it could be const settings equals this.props, and then we can do settings.layout.modal equals node, not nose. So yeah, basically this is how we render the modal box. And so what's going to happen now is when we render the layout, because the layout gets rendered before, we're always going to have access to the modal. And so once we render the layout, then basically the inside stuff is going to get rendered. So like our welcome or dashboard or whatever it is that we're rendering, it's going to come along with the layout. So that means that we'll always have access to the modal whenever we need it. So the modal is now a part of the layout. So what that means is we need to make sure that everything is still working here. So we don't need to render the modal anymore. So there's no errors. So we also need to refactor this guy here. So we want to keep example of the same. So what we want to do here is import, inject, observer from mobx react. And then here we want to do an inject settings observer. And then basically here, what we really want to do is we want to do a const settings equals this.props, and then we can do a settings.layout.modal, settings.layout.modal.open. All right, so that should be pretty much it for the refactor. Now we have, the modal box rendering in the layout. Let's try this out. Let's go into the browser and do a reload real quick. Let's take a look and to see if the modal box is rendered. So we can see here the modal is rendered and it's grayed out, which means it's there and it's disabled like the way we want it. If I click here, the modal shows up and it's no longer a part of our page. It's, as you can see here, the page is here and the modal box is here because the modal box is now a part of the layout, and we already always have access to the modal box now because we set it to an external state. The state is then modified by our layout, and when the modal box gets rendered, we set the state to have access to the modal box, and then we manipulate the modal box using the state, the observable over here. So that's how we injected the state. We use inject settings, and then we have settings.layout.modal. So your settings file can be as complicated as you want. So you can have subsettings and all that stuff. So right now, this particular setting is a setting for the layout. You could have a const, whatever other thing you might have, like app. And then you store other stuff in here. So that, that'll be up to you. So for me, for example, this is, I've been using this pattern for a while and it works. So yeah, sometimes I populate the settings with a little bit more stuff, but yeah, this is generally the pattern. So yeah, with this refactor, we've cleaned up our modal box and it's ready to rock and roll. So what we're going to be doing is in the next couple of episodes, we're going to be creating the content. So basically the welcome, let's get started. We should be able to create the form that will allow us to create the account. So going back to our development of our application now. So yeah, with that, I want to wrap it up. So like, share, and subscribe. Become a member on our site for just $9 a month. And with that, I want to wrap it up, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.